Everything you know about Valentine's Day is a lie, not a romantic lie, a dangerous lie. In the next events, I'm going to show you how one man's refusal to obey an empire's marriage ban didn't just get him executed, but destroyed Rome itself. This isn't a love story, it's a war story. A story about how loving someone in 270 AD could get you beheaded on a roadside outside Rome. About how marriage became treason. About how an empire that controlled everything, armies, economies, gods themselves, couldn't control two people making promises in the dark. And by the end, you'll understand why we still remember a 43-year-old priest who nobody noticed while he was alive, and why Rome, eternal, invincible Rome, is dust. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you see marriage, love, government, and resistance forever. But first, we need to go back to the empire where love was illegal. Before we go into that, don't forget to click the subscribe button and turn on notification. Close your eyes and imagine this with me. 1 million people were crammed into 7 hills. Half of them were slaves. Tenement buildings, 5, 6 stories high, collapsing regularly, burning constantly. The Colosseum, where 50,000 people watched humans torn apart by lions for entertainment. Aqueducts carrying 300 million gallons of water daily. Roads stretching to 3 continents. Legions that could crush any army on Earth. This was Rome at its peak, the greatest empire in human history, ruler of the known world. And it was about to make a decision that led to its destruction. Let me show you how. The emperor's name was Claudius II. They called him Gothicus, the Gothic conqueror, because of how many barbarians he'd slaughtered on the northern frontier. 53 years old, career soldier, brilliant tactician, and terrified. Because Rome was bleeding, Germanic tribes hammering the Rhine frontier, Persians threatening from the east, the empire was fighting on 12 fronts simultaneously, and Claudius needed soldiers, desperately. But he had a problem. His best legionaries kept falling in love. Let me tell you about Marcus Aurelius Caeso, 24, centurion in the Legio III Gallica, decorated, fearless in battle, until he met a girl named Livia at the market. Within 6 months, he married her. Within a year, he became a father. And when the call came to ship east for a 3-year campaign against the Goths, Marcus hesitated. Just for a moment, just a heartbeat. But in battle, a heartbeat of hesitation gets you killed. Gets your entire unit killed. Claudius noticed the pattern. Married soldiers fought differently, more cautiously, more defensively. They had something to lose beyond their own lives. So Claudius did something unprecedented, something no emperor in Rome's 1,000-year history had ever dared. He banned marriage, not for everyone, just for fighting-age men. If you were between 18 and 35 and wanted to serve Rome, and you had to serve Rome if you were a citizen, you couldn't marry, couldn't take a wife, couldn't father legitimate children, couldn't have anything that made you choose family over empire. Sound familiar? I'm not going to draw modern parallels yet, but keep that question in your mind. When has a government ever told you who you can love, and when? We'll come back to that. There was a priest named Valentine, not Saint Valentine, not yet, just Valentine, 43 years old, tending grapevines in a cemetery by day, leading secret Christian worship in catacombs by night. Let me be clear about something. Valentine wasn't a hero, he wasn't brave, he wasn't confident, He wasn't the guy you'd pick to defy an empire. He had anxiety, spent entire nights second guessing decisions, prayed constantly for someone else to step forward and take the risk he knew was coming. You know that feeling when you know what's right and you know you should act, but every instinct screams at you to let someone braver handle it. That was Valentine. Every single day. He lived above a tannery in the Trastevere district. The smell, leather curing in urine, was so strong he stopped noticing after the first year. His hands were permanently stained from crushing grapes for the cemetery's wine. He owned 2 tunics, 1 cloak, a copy of the Gospels he'd transcribed himself, and absolutely nothing else. Invisible, forgettable, ordinary. The kind of person history forgets. Except history didn't forget Valentine. Because invisible people can do extraordinary things because nobody's watching. The knock came on a January night in 269 AD. 3 sharp raps, pause. 2 more, pause. 1, the Christian signal. Valentine opened the door to find a man he'd never seen before. Asterius, a 50-something man, well-dressed, clearly wealthy, and terrified. Valentine knew what Asterius wasn't saying. Illegitimate children in Rome had no rights, could be exposed, literally left to die on hillsides, sold into slavery, disappeared. Please, they really love each other, not just, you know what I mean. They want to build a life, raise a family, be faithful. Isn't that what God wants? Just 3 days of sleepless prayer and a choice that wouldn't go away. On the third night, Valentine realized something. God wasn't going to answer with a voice from heaven. He'd already answered in the Gospels Valentine had copied. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Valentine stood, found Asterius's address, sent word. Bring them. Tomorrow night. Tell no one else. And with those words, Valentine started a resistance movement that would outlive the empire that tried to stop it. But we're getting ahead. First, you need to understand what marriage meant in Rome, because it wasn't what you think. Now, click the subscribe button to know more. Because unless you understand Roman marriage, you won't understand why what Valentine did was so dangerous. In Rome, marriage wasn't about love, it was a business transaction, a political alliance, a property transfer. Fathers arranged marriages to connect families, consolidate wealth, secure political advantage. The bride had no say, often met her husband at the wedding. Love? That was for affairs and brothels. Sex was about power, not intimacy. Roman men were expected to have mistresses, slaves, prostitutes. Fidelity was for women, and even then, only because paternity mattered for inheritance. Marriage was duty, obligation, strategy. But Christian marriage was completely different. Paul's letter to the Ephesians said, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." You see what that means? Sacrificial love, agape, laying down your life, not ownership, partnership, not power, service, not transaction, covenant. And here's why Rome was terrified. If 2 people could make vows that transcended imperial law, if love could be stronger than the state, if individuals could create bonds the emperor couldn't break, then the empire's entire foundation was a lie. Because Rome's power rested on one claim: Caesar is Lord. Everything, your body, your family, your future, belonged to the state. But Christian marriage said, my body belongs to my spouse. My vows belong to God. My future is not Rome's to command. You see it now. Marriage wasn't just about love, it was ideological warfare. Now, what happens when this two lovebirds gets together? Let's see. The first marriage ceremony happened in a widow's house. Her name was Prisca, 73 years old, tiny, fierce. She'd buried 3 children and outlived 2 husbands. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped caring what emperors thought. Valentine arrived after dark. Asterius was already there with his son, Marcus, 20 years old, nervous, hands shaking, and the girl, Julia, 19 with Egyptian features, beautiful, calm. Marcus began by thanking Father Valentine, but before allowing him to continue, Valentine stopped him and insisted that they first understand the cost of what they were about to do. He explained that the ceremony would have no legal standing and that Rome would not recognize their union. If discovered, he would be arrested and possibly executed, and they themselves could face charges of conspiracy, with consequences extending even to their families. He reminded them that there was still time to walk away. Julia responded with calm and unwavering resolve, making it clear that they would not walk away. Marcus affirmed their decision, expressing their desire not only for marriage, but for permanence, for forever. Valentine looked at them and saw something he had nearly forgotten existed: hope. Not naive hope, not ignorant hope, hope that understood the cost and chose to accept it anyway. Valentine then declared that they would begin. The ceremony was simple: no music, no decoration, no witnesses except Asterius and Prisca, just bread, wine, candles, and sacred words that had been spoken for 200 years. Valentine guided them through their vows, asking Marcus to affirm his commitment to take Julia as his wife, to love her as Christ loved the church, to lay down his life for her, to forsake all others, and to remain faithful until death. Marcus affirmed his vow. He then asked Julia to affirm her commitment to take Marcus as her husband, explaining the nature of their union as partnership rather than domination, a faithful love enduring until death. Julia affirmed her vow as well. Valentine tied their hands together with a simple cloth, prayed over them, shared bread and wine, the Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ. And in that moment, in a widow's house in Trastevere, with no legal documentation and no state approval, Marcus and Julia became husband and wife. It took 12 minutes to change 2 lives forever and planted the first seed of Rome's destruction. Because guess what, they told people? Not everyone, just those they call trusted friends. And those friends had friends. And within weeks, whispers spread through the Christian underground: there's a priest who will marry you, even though it's illegal. His name is Valentine. Valentine performed the second ceremony 2 weeks later, then the third, then the fourth. Different locations every time: a barn, a warehouse, the catacombs when necessary, always after dark, always in secret, always with the same warning: this could get us all killed. And every time the couple said, "We don't care. We want this." By spring of 269 AD, Valentine had married 27 couples, 27 acts of defiance, 27 seeds planted, and Rome was starting to notice. Because in empire, secrets don't stay secret. Shadows eventually catch light, and someone was watching. Someone who would force Valentine to make the choice that defined everything. But before we get there, you need to meet the person who changed Valentine's mind about martyrdom. And to get the complete story, click the subscribe button. Now, let me tell you about the 8th couple Valentine married, because their story reveals something crucial. Marius and Lucia. Marius was 28, a centurion in the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguard. Lucia was 26, a widow, freed woman, was born a slave, but bought her freedom at 21. They met at a fountain. She was drawing water. He was off duty, tired, cynical about Rome and duty and everything. In a memory that lingered between them, Marius asked whether she believed in the gods. Lucia explained that she did not believe in many gods, but in one God, singular. He realized then that she was Christian and reminded her that such faith could put her life at risk. She acknowledged the danger calmly and asked him, without accusation but with quiet challenge, whether he intended to report her. He didn't. Instead, he kept coming back to that fountain, kept asking questions. Why do you believe in a crucified criminal? How can you forgive the people who enslaved you? What makes you so peaceful? Questions went on until he finally questioned one that led them to Valentine. 6 months later, Marius was baptized in the Tiber at dawn, and 3 months after that, he asked Lucia to marry him. They came to Valentine in June 269 AD, met in the catacombs beneath the Via Appia. Before Valentine could make any decision, Marius explained the situation. He revealed that he was a Praetorian, sworn to guard the emperor and enforce his laws, yet he was now asking Valentine to break imperial law by marrying them. He added that he would understand if Valentine refused, leaving the choice entirely in the priest's hands. Valentine looked at this soldier, this man who'd sworn oaths to Caesar, who wore the purple cloak of Rome's elite. Who could, with one word, have Valentine arrested? Valentine asked Marius whose authority stood higher, Caesar's or Christ's. Marius affirmed that Christ's authority came first. With that acknowledgement, Valentine knew there was no obstacle, and the path to the ceremony was clear. The ceremony happened in a storage room beneath a bakery, flour dust in the air, the smell of rising dough. Valentine married them by lamplight while the city above slept. And here's what matters. Marius went back to the Praetorian barracks, continued serving as imperial guard. But now he belonged to something higher. See the brilliance? Valentine wasn't asking Christians to overthrow Rome. He was teaching them to outlive Rome, to build families and communities and bonds that would endure when empire crumbled. Because empires always crumble, love, rightly ordered, doesn't. By February 269 AD, 32 couples were married. By March, 41. By April, 58, in different locations, from different backgrounds, with different stories, but the same vows, the same bread, the same wine, the same defiant, beautiful act of covenant. And Valentine watched these marriages take root, watched couples weather persecution together, watched them have children, named them after martyrs, raised them in the faith, watched something stronger than Rome emerge from the catacombs. He was 43, still anxious, still afraid, but less alone now, because he'd learned something crucial. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's fear transformed into purpose, but purpose makes you visible. And in Rome, visibility was dangerous. Would he keep choosing courage or eventually hide from the predator? Subscribe to this channel to see full story. The marker was placed, the file was thickening, and Valentine's time was running out. Over the next months, Quintus built his case, identified dozens of Christian households, cross-referenced attendance at suspected gatherings, traced the network of marriages back to common elements, and everywhere one name kept appearing: Valentine. The priest who says yes when the law says no. By December 269 AD, Quintus had enough evidence. He drafted his report, sealed it, delivered it personally to the prefect of Rome, and in a marble office overlooking the forum, a decision was made. Arrest Valentine. Make an example. Send a message that would echo through every illegal marriage, every defiant Christian, every subject who thought love transcended law. But before they could execute the warrant, something happened. Something Quintus didn't anticipate. Something that would force him to confront the very thing he'd spent his career avoiding. What if the people he's hunting are right? Quintus woke to his daughter screaming. Her name was Cassia, 8 years old, his only child. She'd been complaining of headaches for a week and now she couldn't see. Complete blindness, sudden, terrifying. In desperation, Quintus ordered his wife to fetch the physician immediately. The doctor came, examined her, and found nothing wrong. The physician examined her carefully and explained that sometimes these conditions resolved on their own, and sometimes they did not, offering only uncertainty and apology. Quintus, who controlled so much through information, suddenly controlled nothing. His daughter might never see again, and Roman medicine had no answers. That night, Quintus's wife, Octavia, made a confession. Octavia confessed to Quintus that she had been attending Christian gatherings in secret for months. She acknowledged that he investigated and arrested Christians, but insisted that they possessed a different kind of power, not political, but spiritual. Quintus reacted with shock and disbelief, questioning her sanity. Yet Octavia pressed on, reminding him that their daughter was blind and that physicians could not help. She explained that she had witnessed healings firsthand and begged to bring their daughter to one of the Christian priests, pleading for him to allow it. Quintus stared at his wife. Everything in him, his career, his loyalty, his pragmatism, screamed no. But desperation is a powerful solvent. It dissolves principles you thought were absolute. Quintus asked which priest she meant, and Octavia answered quietly, Valentine, the man whose arrest warrant sat on the prefect's desk. The man Quintus had built an entire case against. Quintus ordered that Valentine be brought to their home that very night, in complete secrecy. Would his desperation end with hope, or would he seize the opportunity for something more? Well, Valentine arrived after midnight, dressed as a laborer with his face covered. He knew this was probably a trap, knew Quintus was an informant, but he came anyway. Quintus confronted Valentine, stating that he knew the priest they called Valentine. He made clear that he knew exactly who he was and what he had done, and that detailed files existed documenting his actions. Yet beneath that authority and knowledge lay a father's desperation. He was pleading, almost begging, for Valentine's help because his daughter was blind. Valentine looked at Quintus, saw a man stripped of power, reduced to a father, desperate. Valentine instructed them to bring the blind girl. Awe. They led 8-year-old Cassia into the room, eyes clouded, vacant. Reaching blindly for her father's hand, Cassia reached out blindly, asking her father where they were. Quintus reassured her gently, telling her it was all right and explaining that the man before them was going to pray for her. Valentine knelt before her, eye level, gentle. Valentine told Cassia that he could promise nothing, that he was not a magician but simply a priest. He explained that he served a God who heals, who restores, and who sees even when human sight fails. Cassia agreed, allowing him to pray for her. Valentine placed his hands on her head and prayed, simply and honestly. Valentine prayed over Cassia, invoking Jesus, who healed the man born blind and gave sight to those sitting in darkness. He spoke of the little girl as precious, loved, and fearfully and wonderfully made, asking that her sight be restored according to God's will, not for his own glory, not to prove anything, but solely because of divine love. Nothing happened. No flash of light, no dramatic moment, just silence. Quintus felt disappointment settle like lead. Of course, superstition, desperation, making us believe in magic. Then Cassia gasped. Cassia began to see shapes and then recognized her father's face. The clouds in her eyes cleared slowly, like fog burning off under the morning sun. Her pupils focused, tracking movement until they found her father's face, and she cried out with joy, realizing she could see him. The family embraced, overwhelmed with tears and relief. Quintus held his daughter, looked at Valentine over her shoulder, and understood something that shattered his entire worldview. The people I've been hunting have access to power I don't understand, power that heals instead of destroys, power that serves instead of controls. Quintus, broken and overwhelmed, declared that he would destroy all the files, all the evidence he had gathered against Valentine that very night. Valentine stopped him, insisting that the files be kept updated and even added to, explaining that he would not stop his work. He would continue marrying couples, building the church, and defying the imperial decree. He revealed that when the authorities came for him, he wanted Quintus to be the one to arrest him. Quintus asked why, and Valentine explained that in doing so, Quintus would understand the purpose behind his actions, and that perhaps, after his death, Quintus might share what he had witnessed that night, a testimony far more important than Valentine's own life. Quintus stood there, his daughter's hand in his, watching Valentine leave. And, for the first time in his career, he understood some things are worth dying for. Some truths are worth more than safety. Valentine knew his time was short. The miracle had bought him weeks, maybe months. But Rome always collected its debts, and the emperor was about to demand payment. Because in February 270 AD, everything came to a head. The arrest, the trial, the prison, the choice, and the execution that would echo for 17 centuries. On February 10th, 270 AD, dawn, Valentine was pruning grapevines in the cemetery when they came. 6 soldiers, led by Quintus. Valentine saw them coming, and he could have run. The catacombs were 50 feet away. Dozens of exits, he knew every tunnel, but he didn't run, just set down his pruning shears, wiped his hands on his tunic, and waited. Quintus announced to Valentinus, priest of the Christian sect, that he was under arrest for performing marriages in violation of Imperial Decree 268, for organizing illegal religious gatherings, and for conspiracy against the state. He then asked if Valentine would come peacefully. Valentine agreed. They bound his hands, not roughly, almost respectfully. And as they led him away, Valentine looked back at the grapevines, thought, I won't see the harvest this year. But he didn't know that the real harvest was already planted in the hearts of 87 couples he'd married, in the children being raised in Christian homes, in the network of believers who would continue after he was gone. The Tullianum, Rome's oldest prison, carved from solid rock beneath the Temple of Concord, where Jugurtha starved, where Vercingetorix was strangled, where enemies of Rome went to be forgotten. 8 feet square, one opening high above for light. The smell, I won't spare you, of centuries of human waste, blood, and death. They lowered Valentine through the ceiling on a rope, dropped him the last 5 feet, then pulled up the rope, and Valentine was alone in absolute darkness. This is the part they don't tell you in Sunday school, the part that makes the story real. Valentine broke, not physically, spiritually. 7 days in absolute darkness, no light, no sound except water dripping somewhere, no human contact, just stone, cold, silence, and doubt. On the first day, Valentine prayed, confidently, hopefully, Father, use this for your glory. Let my imprisonment strengthen the church. Give me courage. On the second day, the prayers became questions. Why am I here? Did I mishear you? Should I have fled instead? On the third day, the questions became accusations. I obeyed you. I served you. I married couples in your name. And this is how you reward faithfulness with darkness and death? By the fifth day, Valentine wasn't praying. He was arguing with God, screaming at stone walls that absorbed every word. I trusted you. I could have run. I could have saved myself. I did what you asked, and you abandoned me. No voice answered. No angel appeared. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you question everything. Have you ever been there, where you did everything right and got crushed anyway? Where God felt absent and doubt felt certain? Where the darkness was so complete you couldn't remember what light looked like? That was Valentine for 7 days. And this is important. The story doesn't work without this part. Because heroes who never doubt aren't heroes, they're myths. Valentine was real, human, breakable, and that's why his choice matters. Do you think Valentine would have compromised his belief? Let's see. On the seventh day, they came for him. They pulled Valentine up through the ceiling into light so bright it felt like knives, led him through corridors to a room with windows, actual windows, sunlight, the smell of olive oil lamps instead of decay, and sitting behind a simple desk, the prefect. The prefect's name was Placidus Furious, 58 years old, career administrator, not cruel, but just efficient. He looked at Valentine, filthy, blinking, unsteady, and sighed. Placidus instructed him to sit. Guards pushed Valentine into a chair. Placidus addressed him, confirming that he was Valentine, the priest. He stated that Valentine had been performing marriages in violation of the imperial decree and asked whether he denied the charges. Valentine acknowledged the accusations and admitted that he did not deny them. Placidus set down his stylus, studied Valentine. Then this should be simple, Placidus said. You're guilty of defying imperial law. The penalty is death. Unless, and here it comes, the offer every martyr receives, the escape route, the compromise, the way to save yourself. Unless you publicly recant, acknowledge that imperial law supersedes religious practice. Promise to obey future decrees. You can even continue as a priest, privately. We don't care what you believe in your heart, just obey publicly with one statement. 5 minutes, your life continues. Valentine sat there, exhausted, broken, doubting everything. And the prefect's offer sounded reasonable. I could live, keep helping people, just privately, quietly. Is defiance really worth dying for? The prefect leaned forward. Valentine, he said, I'm not a cruel man. I don't enjoy this. But Rome requires order, law, stability. If everyone defied decrees based on personal conviction, we'd have chaos. You understand that, don't you? Good intentions aren't enough. Society needs structure. One day before execution, Valentine sat in darkness, praying quietly when he heard something impossible. Father Valentine, a little girl's voice whispered. They lowered someone into the cell. Small, light. When Valentine's eyes adjusted, he saw a girl, maybe 12 years old, holding a small oil lamp. Her name was Julia, not the Julia he'd married to Marcus, a different Julia. And as the lamplight caught her face, Valentine saw she was Asterius's daughter, the jailer's daughter, the blind girl he'd heard about but never met. My father couldn't come, she said, but he sent me with food and light. He said you shouldn't die in darkness. Your father is the jailer, Valentine asked. Yes, she answered. He's not supposed to let anyone visit, but he said you're different. You're the one who marries people when Rome says no. That sounds brave. I'm not brave, Valentine said. I'm terrified. Julia sat down and matter-of-factly reflected that brave people are always terrified, and that is what makes their actions brave. Valentine almost smiled at her observation. He asked her age, and she revealed that she was 12, almost 13. He remarked that she was very wise for her age. She explained that having been blind until the previous month, she had learned to perceive truth in ways others might not, noting that people often lie with their faces, but not with their voices. Looking directly at him, she observed that his voice revealed fear, yet also showed that he would. Valentine felt tears coming. This girl he'd never met understood him better than he understood himself. Father says you die tomorrow, she said. Are you afraid? She asked. Yes, Valentine responded. Me too. When I was blind, I was afraid I'd never see sunrise, never see my father's face, never see colors. But then, I don't know, someone prayed for me, and I could see. Death is like blindness, isn't it? You can't see what's on the other side, but maybe someone's praying, and maybe you'll see. Valentine wept, not from fear, from the strange beauty of truth spoken by a child in a prison. They sat together in that cell. Julia told him about her life, her father, the miracle of sight, how everything looked magical now, even ordinary things like bread, water, stone. As evening fell, Julia stood to leave. Julia admitted that her father would worry, but asked if she could make a small request. Valentine welcomed anything she wished. She asked if he would write her a letter so she could remember him. Valentine had nothing, no parchment, no ink, no stylus. Julia reached into her robe, pulled out a scrap of cloth, a piece of charcoal. Valentine took them with shaking hands. By the light of Julia's lamp, he wrote, the words came slowly, carefully, not a theological treatise, not a defense, just truth. Remember that love is sacrifice. Remember that marriage is covenant. Remember that I go to the God who is love itself. Remember that nothing, not death, not empire, not law, can separate us from Christ, from your Valentine. He folded the cloth, gave it to Julia. The guards called. Time to leave. Julia stood, looked at Valentine one last time, pulled up through the ceiling, lamplight disappearing, leaving Valentine in darkness, but not alone, never alone. That night, Valentine didn't sleep. He prayed, remembered faces, made peace, and waited for dawn. Valentine was pulled from the cell, given water to wash, a clean tunic customary for executions. His hands were bound behind his back, and they led him out of Rome, via Flaminia, the road north, just outside the city walls, where Rome disposed of criminals. Valentine walked barefoot. The stones were cold, frost still clinging to shadows, birds singing, oblivious to human drama, the sky lightening from black to deep blue to gold. And Valentine noticed everything: the way light caught on a puddle, the smell of wood smoke from a distant farm, the sound of his own breathing, the texture of rope against his wrists. In your last minutes, you don't think grand thoughts. You notice the world. You realize how beautiful it was, how much you'll miss it. At the execution site, they made him kneel, facing east, toward the rising sun. The executioner stood behind him, a professional, Legio II soldier, experienced, his sword already drawn, a Roman Sparta, one strike if he was skilled, and he was. A priest of Mars read the charges. Valentine didn't listen. He was praying silently. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Receive these couples I married. Protect them. Multiply them. Let my death be seed. He thought of Marcus and Julia, hoped their baby would be healthy, thought of Marius and Lucia, hoped they'd stay faithful, thought of the 87 couples, hoped they remembered that marriages work, that love requires tending, that covenant is daily choice. He thought of Jesus, who also knelt, who also prayed, who also went to death for love of those who didn't yet understand. The executioner raised his blade. Sunlight ran along its edge like water. Valentine closed his eyes. The executioner brought the blade down, and in that instant, Valentinus's life ended, his body falling silent beneath the unforgiving sun. They buried him quickly. Shallow grave beside Via Flaminia. No ceremony, no marker, no name. Just a body in the ground and soldiers walking away. The authorities wanted no shrine, no pilgrimage site, no martyrdom cult, just forgetfulness, as if Valentine had never existed. But the church remembered. Asterius the jailer whose daughter was healed, his heart changed, and he came that night, dug up the body, washed it, wrapped it properly, reburied Valentine in the Christian cemetery, and planted a laurel tree above the grave. Prisca, the 73-year-old widow who'd hosted that first ceremony, she wrote everything down, every detail she could remember: the couples, the ceremonies, the arrest, the execution. Before she died at 79, she'd copied the accounts 17 times, gave each copy to a different church, and the couples? The 87 couples Valentine had married. They didn't forget. Marcus and Julia's son was born in April. They named him Valentinus, raised him in the faith, told him about the priest who defied empire so his parents could marry. Marius left the Praetorian Guard, couldn't serve an emperor who killed people like Valentine, became a deacons, and served the poor, was eventually martyred himself in 285 AD. But before he died, he'd baptized 300 people. Antoninus and Cassia, another couple Valentine married. They had 7 children, named their first daughter Julia, after the blind girl who brought light to Valentine's darkness. The couples endured, had children, raised families, built communities, and every year on February 14th, the date of Valentine's execution, they gathered at his grave, told stories, broke bread, renewed their vows, and something strange began happening. Other couples wanted to join. Christians who'd never met Valentine, people who'd heard the story and wanted to honor covenant love. Within 10 years, February 14th was marked on Christian calendars across the empire. Within 50 years, churches were being named after Valentine. Valentine is remembered on every continent in languages Rome never heard by billions of people across 17 centuries. February 14th became a celebration of love, not the sanitized, commercialized version we see. Valentine's story isn't just history, it's a mirror. We live in a world that treats marriage as temporary, love as feeling, commitment as optional, covenant as outdated. We swipe right, hook up, move on. We're told that promises are negotiable, that forever is naive, that divorce is inevitable. So why bother trying? We've reduced Valentine's Day to roses, chocolate, dinner reservations, Hallmark cards that cost $6.99 and mean nothing, a commercial holiday that makes single people feel bad and married people feel obligated. But that's not what Valentine died for. Valentine died because he believed marriage is sacred, love is sacrificial. Covenant is stronger than convenience. Promises matter more than feelings. He believed that when two people stand before God and say, I do, they're not just expressing emotion, they're defying chaos. They're building something that outlasts them. They're participating in the most revolutionary act in human history, choosing to love when you don't have to. And here's what we've lost: that love isn't about finding someone who makes you happy. It's about becoming someone who lays down their life. So, here's my challenge to you. If you're married or in a committed relationship, recommit today, not because you feel like it, because you promised. Renew your vows, say them out loud, mean them, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard, because that's when covenant matters most. If you're single, don't settle. Don't accept the swipe culture. Don't reduce yourself to a profile picture. Wait for someone who understands that love is sacrifice, that marriage is covenant, that from your Valentine means until death. And if you're facing injustice, if you're being told to compromise your convictions for safety, if empire, whatever that looks like in your life, demands you bow, remember, Valentine. Remember that one person saying no to power can change everything. That defiance plants seeds. That martyrdom, dying for what matters, is never wasted. Because here's the secret Rome never learned: you can kill the witness, but you can't kill the testimony. Truth survives, love endures. Covenant outlasts empire. Valentine died kneeling on the Via Flaminia, executed for marrying people, for saying yes when Rome said no, for believing that love transcends law. And 1,756 years later, we still remember, not because he was powerful, because he was faithful, not because he was fearless, because he chose truth despite fear, not because he changed Rome's law, because he lived by a higher law. And that higher law is still available, still calling, still asking, what will you die for? What matters more than safety? What promises will you keep when keeping them costs everything? From your Valentine. Not from Hallmark, not from commercialism, not from sentiment. From a 43-year-old priest who loved unto death. The beginning of the end of empire is always the same: when people choose covenant over control, when individuals build bonds the state can't break, when love proves stronger than law. Valentine started it with 87 couples in secret, but it spread, multiplied, became a movement that outlasted the empire that tried to stop it. And it's still spreading, still multiplying, still roaring truth to power. February 14th, 270 AD, a priest died, an empire began its fall, and love, real, covenantal, sacrificial love, won. That's the real Valentine's Day. That's the love worth dying for. That's the story they don't want you to know. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe now to uncover the hidden truths history tried to bury. Follow the journey, like the video, to fuel more revelations, and share it with those who need to hear what they're not being told. Every click keeps the story alive and the truth spreading.